Kia whakaronga ki au ki te tangi a te manu. Tui, 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 tui ia. Tui runga, tui raro, tui waho, tui roto. Tui te here tangata i tā kia mai I Hawaii ki nui, I Hawaii ki roa, I Hawaii ki pā mamao. Tohono I wairua, karongo te pō, karongo te ao. I te kōrero, I te wānanga. Ki te whaiao, ki te ao mārama, ki hei Māori ora. Ko rangi nui e tui hone, ko papa tuanuku e takoto nei, tēnā kōrua. E mihi ana ki te kingi Māori, I runga I te ahurewa tapu o tōna whaia I ona tipuna. Nā te motu I tohu, nā rātua no te mana Māori motuhaki, pai mārere ki ai. I ngā mate huhua o te tau, te mārama, te wiki, te rangi nei. I kawa I runga o tō tātou pokohiwi, ko ki wairua mai whakapiri mai. Ki ngā mate uruta, ngā mate karauna o te ao, he aroha ki a kūtau, whakangaro ki pairau, haere, haere, haere atira. E kia nei te kōrero a te kingi, a mohe ake te ori te iwi, ka puta ki te whaiao. Nō reira, kia tātou, ngā mōri hukua hui hui mai nei I runga te kaupapa o te rā. Te whakatauki o ngā tupuna e hara taku toa he tō takitahi, engari he tō takitini. Kia ora, kia ora, kia ora. E ngā mana, e ngā iwi, e ngā rangatira ki te ao. Tēnā kūtau, tēnā kūtau, tēnā kūtau. Ko tai nui me ngā toki mata whaurua, ngā waka. Ko wai kato mani poto me te rarawa ngā iwi. Ki te taha tau iwi no Ireland, England me Scotland, o kutupuna, ko Gannon Ormsby taku ingoa. Welcome to today's nature panel. We've come together to wānanga about rangi and papa for the natural world. A wānanga is where people come together to discuss and share their mātauranga or knowledge. My grandfather would say, if you can't whakapapa to it, then don't talk about it. So I will tell my story from this perspective. There are three principles that underpin the Māori worldview: whakapapa, whanaungatanga, and whenua. The first principle of whakapapa connection or genealogy from our creation stories of the universe begins in or the nothingness of the unlimited potential, and wai, or water, was everywhere. From this came the sun, stars, planets, and moons over eons and epochal periods of light and darkness across the ocean of the universe. Rangi and papa rushed to each other in tight embrace, only later to be separated by one of their children called Tāne Mahuta, god of the trees and forests, bringing the life principle from the darkness into the light. This separation created further life in wai, the ocean's fresh water, across the whenua and the sky. The second principle is whanaungatanga, or relationships, our interconnectedness with the universe and natural world. Everything on this planet is inextricably linked. In many ways, our connectedness to all living things means we are part of a much larger ecosystem, not superior to any other living organisms, but rather integrated with our natural ecosystem. Human development has caused the demise of many of the children of rangi and papa. And so climate change action is about protection and restoration for the benefit of our natural resources and biodiversity species. Rangi, or Sky Father, protects all life, and papa, or Earth Mother, nourishes all life. Human beings are one of their many children. The third principle is whenua, which means land or placenta. This imagery of the placenta nourishing baby whilst in the mother's womb, surrounded by water, relates in a macro sense that the world is our womb and we are connected to it by whenua and wai. This is holistic in its totality and fundamental to the Māori worldview. It is custom to bury the placenta with a tree or near a tree where other placentas have been buried, which gives meaning to the name tangata whenua, or people of the land. We are descendants of Rangi and Papa. There are tuakana and tēna within each family, or elder or younger siblings. This concept is the same in our global family. Human beings are tēna, the last born, and tuakana are the trees and all other life forms. We believe tēna cannot achieve anything without the support of tuakana. For this to happen, tēna must respect tuakana. If tuakana supports tēna, then they will provide sustenance. This in practice is the circle of love and respect. We must reset the thinking and refocus our efforts today that empower actions of kaitiapitanga or guardianship and reconnect to this wisdom. Our ancestors believed with every part of their being they were connected to the natural world and lived in harmony with the environment. We now have a climate crisis because modern day society has forgotten their connection and responsibility to Rangi and Papa. Wars have created divisions between countries, causing intergenerational harm. Capitalism has destroyed ecosystems around the world, and profiteering in natural resources prevail over environmental sustainability. Fundamentally, greed and hate influences modern societies with no consideration to their responsibilities, obligations to the natural world. We have lost our way. Oral traditional knowledge is transferred from generation to generation, and this wisdom has ensured that we can continue to survive and prosper. I share this knowledge in the hope that the COP26 leaders will make significant tangible investment actions that will change the present path. This must be an intergenerational approach, mō ngā tamariki mokopuna, mō ngā uri whakaheke, for all our children, grandchildren and future generations. Therefore, we must empower and enable our tohunga, wise ones, kaumātua, knowledge holders, navigators, wayfinders, matakite, seers, tree growers, forest whisperers, ringarupa, weathered hands, gardeners, hunters and gatherers, ringawera, bakers and cooks, rangatira, weavers, seed savers, knitters, potters and beekeepers. We must recognise and include our creatives to bind us in unity towards the spiritual manifestation of collective intent, kotahitanga, by singing their songs of hope, whispering prayers, bearing light, writing poems, and sharing their gifted and artistic minds. And we need the love of rainbow souls, stargazers, imaginers, dreamers, inventors, and joyous ones. But more importantly, we must protect and support wahine, ngā whare tangata, the feminine energy, mothers, life givers, sisters, daughters, nieces, healers, growers, peacemakers, medicine carriers, and have faith in their matriarchal leadership. We have work to do for all the children of Rangi and Papa and for all our children yet to come. Let us wage aroha, love and peace, that is light enough to show us the way. Te kōrero whakamutunga no pēngi pōtatau. Ko tahi anō toko hau te mera e kuhuna ai te miro mā, te miro whero me te miro pango. I muri, kia mau ki te whakapono, kia mau ki te ture, kia mau ki te aroha. Hei aha te aha, hei aha te aha. Pai māriri. Tēnā koutou katoa. It's my honour and privilege to welcome our next panel person, Huia Forbes, a whanaunga of mine from Maniapoto, mihi ana ki a koe Huia, tēnei tā rākau ki a koe.
Tēnā koe, Gannon. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe, I tō mihi ki a tātou katoa. Tēnā koutou hoki, ki te wharewananga o Waikato ki a koutou katoa I te rānei. No wai katoa mania potoa hau, he uri au o ngā moana, ko whaingaroa, ko kāwhia, o ngā maunga ko karioi ko pirongia. Ko Huia Forbes tōku ingoa. I'm here today as a trustee of the Human Ecology Foundation, a UK-based charity that works across the Commonwealth countries to support largely grassroots projects that encourage thriving communities and a thriving environment. I have a day job in New Zealand, which is to work for the Department of Conservation, where I'm involved in treaty negotiations, although I'm not here today representing the department or in any way. But my role is largely across all facets of my life is to really support people making connections and relationships with the environment. So I'm really happy to follow the kōrero that Gannon has just given. And in my short time here today, what I would like to do is to propose a simple message, which is that by fostering and enabling everybody to spend time in nature, we may have the tangible benefit or outcome of creating an environment in New Zealand where we have low-lying perhaps, but large-scale support for the structural change that our government will need to make in order to achieve the type of commitments we're seeing them make at the COP26. So let's just start back with that COP26. So there's been a lot of talk and a lot of commitments to date, but what I'm seeing in the news is that the rubber really hits the road this week. And to achieve the commitments that are being made in terms of percentages, reductions, trees being planted, wetlands being restored, we will need, in my opinion, some structural change across the nation, not just individual action, but government setting up an environment where those things can happen. And to do that successfully, we'll need the support of the people. So one of the things that, not that I'm speaking for them, but the Department of Conservation feel confident we can say is that time spent in nature is really good for people, and it in particularly we know that it supports people's well-being, their resilience to changing environments, other types of environments, and also their mental health, particularly their mental health. Another thing, so that's the message one about why this is good, regardless of anything else that's going on in the world. But another thing we know is that there is some sort of positive or pro-environmental benefit, more so in children especially who spend time in nature, are more likely to grow up to value and connect with it as an adult. But maybe some low-level underlying positive attitude change that comes with people who spend time in the outdoors. And so my suggestion to you today is that we can't, not everybody is going to be a climate activist. I mean, we're going to see in the following speeches a lot of really positive projects and ways in which people can engage directly with projects that will produce real really good outcomes for New Zealand, for our environment. But there's just also a background level of an attitude or a kind of a moral imperative that it will be really useful for us to create in our society to achieve other changes to support the climate change work that will need to be done. And so my final point, I've really got my 5 minutes honed to a T. The final point I'd like to make is something quite exciting that we've found, the Department of Conservation has found in some recent research, and that is that there's a group of people in our society who recently agreed that they could make a positive difference through their own actions on the environment. And that was a group who are younger, so they're under 30, they're Māori or Pacifica, and they're middle class. And so I think that there's a bit of a wero to go out there as well about the way in which we change what it means to engage with the environment, to really harness the, what could be a really wonderful group of people who could make a real difference in this space. And so just reflecting, for me, I'm just going to finish with a reflection on, I've been watching some previous sessions, and I watched the youth session on Friday, as part of this conference, and one of the speakers there, or actually two of them, including our Kepa, who's going to speak later, spoke about the maramataka. And that seems, so this is personal opinion, I think that that's a really innovative way we can re-look at how we engage with the environment to support that kind of thinking, because that's what our challenge is to find new ways to bring those people in and to encourage them to spend time outside and in the outdoors. So there with my high level, big picture hat on, I'm now going to pass over to Bruce Clarkson, who is going to speak about something much more tangible and really interesting, and some work that he's been doing in Hamilton. Kia koe, Bruce.
Kia ora koutou katoa. I am Bruce Clarkson from Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, and I feel extremely privileged today to be able to share some thoughts with you on how people in an urban centre can mobilise to bring Indigenous nature back into a city, and how that can provide a huge range of environmental and societal benefits. It's easier, of course, if governments like those that are meeting at COP26 provide us with a sound policy and statutory framework, or even funding. But sometimes it's important not to wait. And implementation, I believe, is always best when it's developed from the ground up. It goes without saying that climate change and biodiversity decline are wicked problems, and they are inextricably connected and linked. And that without sustainable cities, we can't have global sustainability. But the real question is, what are we going to do about it? And how can we implement change? Here are the key ingredients in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton. The key ingredients that are needed to begin this sort of journey. Kirikiriroa, a river city in the heart of the Waikato, and a region famed for its agriculture, mainly dairying. However, its Indigenous biodiversity has been severely depleted. Less than 2% of it remains within the city because of its gentle terrain, and most of our Indigenous habitat has been efficiently removed. But the building blocks of a solution are evident on the slide here. The little bush remnants, the mighty Waikato River and its banks, the gully landform network shown there on the slide in the yellow colour, connecting into the Waikato River, and the peat lakes, but most important of all, the people. And there you can see some people working on one of the projects I'm going to mention shortly. Since the year 2000, the city of Kirikiriroa has been on a mission, sometimes bumpy and lacking in clarity, but now building pace and scale to reinstate and retrofit its native plant and animals back into the urban environment by reconstructing Indigenous habitat in people's backyards, on public lands, especially in the gullies, and at the flagship project, Waiwhakariki Natural Heritage Park, shown there on the right with the lovely lake in the centre of the picture. The recent adoption of the long-term plan commitment of $29 million to restore urban nature by Hamilton City Council is a major tipping point. Informed by Te Awanui o Kirikiriroa, or Nature in the City strategy, It articulates a plan for transformational change. Habitat reconstruction is the major pillar of this strategy, of this now more than 20-year journey. As work has progressed, there has been a growing realization of the many benefits this brings beyond those of the initial focus of the project, which was on reversing biodiversity decline. Many of those wider benefits are summarized here on the slide for you, but of course this is not a comprehensive list. And as you can see on that list, maintaining ecosystem services and carbon sequestration figure extremely strongly. But it's the societal benefits, I think, that are particularly striking and important for our future mahi or work. Social cohesion, community building, when people gather together as they did on the previous image to plant up another 2 or 3 hectares of Indigenous habitat on Arbor Day at Waiwhakariki Natural Heritage Park. And especially underscored, I think, at the moment, here in Kirikiriroa in Alert Level 3, the health and recreational benefits of nature and high quality green space in our own backyard. A key component, in fact, of a planning approach, which nowadays is called the 20-minute city. Finally, I just wanted to share some thoughts on the learnings that we've made in our project here in Kirikiriroa, and think that possibly they might be applicable in other parts of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and even in other countries. For the future change which will be needed to tackle the wicked problems of climate change and biodiversity decline. So drawing on the motto of Te Whare Wānanga o Waikato, which is on loan from an older whakatauki which way predates the existence of our university. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. People must be at the centre of the solution, and Indigenous knowledge too and worldviews. For example, Haitiakitanga. Then borrowing from my own discipline, which is ecology, the ecosystem concept applied not just to our targets of interest, the natural ecosystems, but also to the other type of ecosystem that will help us plan for success. And yes, of course, the funding ecosystem, which currently can be extremely perverse. Sprinkled over top of that, a liberal dose of the concept of super cooperation, which was so elegantly described in the 2012 book, which had the byline, Altruism and Evolution and Why We Need Each Other to Succeed. When we have all of these aspects covered off, I think we may then have a reasonable chance at implementation and transformation of the scale to provide the solution. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. It's now my privilege to hand over to Peter, my colleague from Northland. He will sure introduce himself. Over to you, Peter.
Kia ora koutou. I'll just get this slide working. Yeah. Ko toko te maunga, ko Wairota awa, ko Pakia o te taitokara te iwi, ko Peter Bruce iri taku ingoa. Well, thank you for the preceding speakers. It's sort of in some ways setting the scene. Gannon was saying that we are the junior, we are the taina, and also touching on who you were talking about nature's capacity to heal. Now, following Bruce's beautiful images from Kirikiriroa, he talked about the cooling impact of trees, and I want to focus on that a little. Now, this image here is from Mikhail Krejcik's book about the new water paradigm. And what you can see here is the range of temperatures as revealed by infrared photography. And if you look at the roofs of those buildings, and if you look at the cars in the street, you can see that their temperature is over 30 degrees, that white light. But if you look into the background and you see the trees in that forest remnant, you can see that the temperature's down around 14 degrees. Now that's a 15-degree difference. We're asking to reduce the temperature by 2 degrees. And this, I find this really encouraging because it tells me that we can do it. And we know what the ingredient is that we need. It's trees. But I also should add at this point is that pasture, the well-growing, hydrated pasture will also significantly cool. Now, so trees are the gift that keep giving. So they will draw down carbon. We know that. There's a lot of talk about carbon drawdown. But they also cool the environment. So for example, by a 5-meter tree will transpire about 100 liters a day, and that's equivalent to a couple of air conditioning units, domestic air conditioning units. And of course they create shade. And then they also produce this biodiversity, which is the engine of nature. We're not talking about monocultures here, we're talking about diverse ecologies. So I'd like to suggest that even while we absolutely have to stop burning fossil fuels, nature offers our best option for mitigating and adapting to climate change. I'll just repeat that point because it's so important. Nature offers our best options for mitigating and adapting to climate change. So really the process that is really critical here is that process of photosynthesis. And what we've done over time is we've degraded much of the Earth's capacity for photosynthesis. I shouldn't say capacity, but it's actual, because it will nature is abundant as we allow it to be. And of course, in doing so, nature is drawing down carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, transpiring water into the air, and thus cooling, but also generating oxygen. So here's a map of the world. I found this place called Rio Negro in Brazil, very near the equator, in the middle of the rainforest, and the average temperature there is 9 to 28 degrees. If, on the other hand, we look at these two other locations, one is close to the equator, but the average temperature is 19 to 37 degrees. And again, up in the Sahara Desert, or to the north of the Sahara Desert, 17 to 37 degrees. Now that last location is not too much different than us in latitude, but so much hotter. So why is Brazil so cool, or relatively cool? You can guess the answer. So our fastest option for cooling the planet is to actually have to grow more trees. And if we focus on fossil fuels alone, that puts climate change back to the start of the industrial age. But actually, the genesis of climate change was back in those times when we started to denude natural areas. We need to make sure that Papatunuku is well clothed. I just want to allude to this briefly too. This follows a similar theme. What I find with our discourse around climate change is it's often too simplified. So we have, for example, trees are good, cows are bad. Well, actually, cows, and I'm talking to people from Waikato here, so cows in the right context do a lot of good too. I mean, they build soils, but if you look at the way that we industrialize nature, that's where, on the left-hand side here, that's where our problems begin. So what we're doing, we're looking at emissions of methane, but we're not looking at the sinks that nature provides to clean that methane up. So in all of this, and this is my research interests have been in regenerative food systems and climate change. And last year we completed a project guided by local kaumātua looking at regenerative agriculture. But the key learning for us, I guess we went into it with this, but it was much more, it was reinforced much more, was that Western knowledge by itself is not enough. Climate change isn't just a technical problem to be fixed. When we can align Western knowledge, or align, I'm sorry, one of the kaumātua would clip me around the ear for saying align. When we create an interface between Western knowledge and Mātauranga Māori, then maybe we can contribute better to the solution. I'd like to hand over now to Hannah Hagen, who will further illuminate.
Awesome, Peter. Tēnā koutou katoa, tūranga tangata rite, tūranga raro, tūranga makaurau, tūranga nui a ki wae. Ko Hannah Hagen toku ingoa, he mokopuna ahau o te tai rāwhiti, ko te atanga a māhaki, ko rongo whakaata o kunei iwi. I te taha o toku pāpa, North Scotland, Melrose Ear. Kia ora everyone, my name is Hannah Hagen. I'm from Scotland in the east coast of Aotearoa. I'm 17 years old and I'm a climate justice activist. I've just finished my first year here at the University of Waikato and I'm studying political science and Māori and Indigenous studies. I work for Goiko Waikato's Environment Centre as a climate organiser as well. I'm passionate about creating a safe climate future for everyone, and I believe that we can do this by challenging the status quo through transformative and creative collective action. I'm really excited to be here today to discuss the importance of nature and to listen in tautoko, the whakaaro from the other panelists. So, and I'd like to begin today by discussing a study that was released this year about climate anxiety within young people. This study found that 60% of young people feel very worried or extremely worried about climate change. And this worry is largely driven by the inaction of governments. So 65% of participants felt that governments were failing young people, lying about the impacts of action taken, and dismissing people's distress. As a young climate activist, I would agree with this respondents. I would give the same answers if I was taking this survey. So governments, predominantly in the global north, have spent decades of inaction on climate change because they've chosen to prioritize the market economy. And this is ongoing today. Governments continue to implement an economic model grounded in resource-intensive production systems that fail to account for ecological and planetary boundaries. This is resulting not only in climate change, but a plethora of environmental issues, such as deforestation, biodiversity loss, and the degradation of ecosystems. Our political systems value the prosperity of a minority through the exploitation of resources and to the detriment of others. In an Aotearoa context, these concepts of indifference to nature and the maximization of profit through exploitation are new. Tangata whenua interact and live by the world around them. As other panelists have already discussed, the foundation of Māori society begins with people's understanding that they are dependent and obligated to the environment. These solutions to these environmental crises rest in the hands, heart, and whakapapa of Indigenous people. So provided that with climate change and a general disconnect with the environment, no wonder young people are feeling anxious for the world around them, because this is also operating against a backdrop of rapid changes to social, technological, and environmental domains on an unprecedented scale. Rangatahi are also increasingly alienated from the environment and are less likely to engage in nature. So I believe moving into the future, it is our obligation to ensure that everyone has equal access to the environment and that we reconnect back to that foundational understanding that we belong to the environment doesn't belong to us. Kia ora. I now have the privilege to pass the rākau on to Claire. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. Ko Claire St. Pierre tōku ingoa, and yeah, it's an absolute privilege to be part of this discussion today. I'm here as someone who's been involved in community conservation for over 20 years, and I hope to inspire some rangatahi out there, just anyone that's listening really, that they can be part of really positive action to turn things around for native biodiversity, and also, I suppose, to bring some hope, sort of responding to what Hannah's just covered really. So I'm just going to share a presentation about my group, which is for Mount Pirongia, and I'm just going to see if I can get that started. Let's see. There we go. Right, so I hope you can see that. So this is just a quick snapshot of who we are and what we do. So we're really run by volunteers. We've got 400 volunteers involved. We've reintroduced kōkako and pitoitoi to Mount Pirongia, and we do heaps of stuff in the environment and have lots of people that are involved with it. So I've got the contact details of our group here below, and I just want to encourage people, if they're thinking about, oh, I'd like to do something positive, why not choose the most outstanding natural landscape feature in the whole of the Waikato, Pirongia Maunga, that's the largest tract of unbroken native bush left, and it's got a magnificent altitude, so that, you know, it's a really great, I suppose, it has a lot of resilience in terms of climate change, but it's also a biodiversity stronghold with lots of rare species still there. I'd just like to share some of the stuff that I've heard just members of the public tell me when they've actually been able to see a kōkako up close. These kōkako were on Mount Pirongia, but they were dying out in the 1980s and 90s, and in fact the last were captured to stop them going extinct, and we've had the amazing experience of being able to bring those kōkako descendants back to Pirongia. And someone told me that just seeing those birds fills them with so much joy, they just can't describe it. And we have a setup where it's safe for people to have their first experience at doing some climate action with filling bait stations or monitoring kōkako. And we've got lots of systems in place and buddy systems and things like that. So people can choose the activity that meets their fitness levels, and know that they're going to be, given the rundown on how to do things so they can keep themselves safe and actually make a difference. Make some friends too, probably. And as someone's already mentioned, it's really great for your well-being. It sort of increases your resilience, and it's good for your physical fitness too. So just to finish up really, I wanted to give a little image for people, and I'm sure in the springtime in Kirikiriroa and other places around, you've seen tui come along to kōwhai tree, which are in bud and are about to flower. But the thing is, you'll notice that they arrive at those kōwhai trees before the petals open. And in some ways, I think that the people on this panel are those tui that are going to sing their hearts out to try and get those blossoms to open, and so that people can see those beautiful yellow petals and have the taste of that nectar too. So kia ora koutou, that's me. I didn't want to take too long, and now I'm going to hand over to Bianca.
Kia ora. Kia ora koutou. I'm just going to share my presentation here. Kia ora everyone, my name's Bianca Ranson, he uri tēnei o ngā puhi nui tonu, ko ngā te kahu ki whangaroa te hapu. So this is a beautiful photo of Whangaroa Harbour, which is where I whakapapa to, and I just wanted to start off with this whakatauki, he kare moana he manu tirikohu. And the translation of that is a ripple on the sea, a plunging bird, but what it means is, or what it's telling us and what it encapsulates is a message from our tupuna about observations and the importance of our observations on our natural world. And so it was used by our people to understand what kind of fish are running in the moana according to the ripples on the water as the fish are diving. I'm part of a group called Mauri o Te Moana, which is a collective of Māori throughout Aotearoa that are working towards taking care of our moana. So he whakamininga mahi ngātahi kia pikiti ora, kia riakina, kia hikitia te Māori o Te Moana. We are a united collective that works together to activate and amplify efforts for a healthy and thriving moana. So the three different kaupapa that we are looking at are extraction, pollution, and governance. And so we know that we have one of the largest exclusive economic zones in terms of our ocean space in Aotearoa, and very, very little of it, in fact, less than 1% is protected. And so that means that a lot of the commercial industry has had free rein on our oceans in terms of extraction. So extraction obviously includes, that includes recreational and commercial fishing. Extraction is also, dredging. Extraction is, extracting for oil and methane. And it's also mining for sand and minerals. The next one is pollution. So pollution covers microplastics, which if you head over to our Facebook page, Mauri o Te Moana, you'll see that we did a Facebook Live with some incredible speakers. We had Tina Ngata, we had Jerissa Lee and Charlie Thomas, which were talking about microplastics and the impacts that they have on our biodiversity and our marine life. The other kaupapa or the other issues to do with pollution, discharge into our marine environment, sedimentation, horticulture, and also dumping. So if there's dredging happening, a lot of the time that has to be dumped somewhere also within our moana space. And then governance is really around decision making. So that's, community, they can come down to community, hapu, whānau, hapu, iwi. It covers the RMA, reforms, and tangata whenua, tangata moana. So this morning I was just out paddling through some of our bays here on Waiheke, particularly Pūtiki Bay, and I wasn't actually sure exactly what I was going to present on, so I'll get into that a little bit later. But I think that one of the main issues that we really need to be looking at in terms of climate change is how did we get into this mess in the first place? And so as Māori, we know that our tupuna and through the kōrero and the whakatauki, the whakatauaki, that has been handed down to us through our elders and the traditional knowledge that we still hold, that we have seen a huge decline in our biodiversity within our ocean space and within our taiao as a whole over the last 200 years. And so this slide that you'll see in front of you now has been put together by Hineka Mako and Mike Smith, who is also my dad. And I think that this really paints the picture of where we have gone wrong. So on the left there, you can see that we have the extractive economy. And so that worldview is based on consumerism and a colonial mindset, which dominates the way that our environment is exploited and extracted from. And so resources are looked at as a way to create income. And so a lot of that is through extraction, which some of the speakers have previously talked about. And so that's really about the dig, burn and dump mentality. And so the way that that happens and the purpose of it is the enclosure of wealth and power. And so you'll have a very few people that make a whole bunch of money of other people that get paid a lot less money to use those resources that are of detriment to our environment. And that is upheld by the finance, the finance sector of the current governance that we see dominating Aotearoa. If we look over to the right-hand side, we look into Te Ao Māori. So we have Te Ao Hurihuri. And so for us, Te Ao Tūroa and our environment, we directly whakapapa to. And so because we whakapapa to the moana and because we whakapapa to the whenua, we have that relationship is tapu. And that means that we have an inherent responsibility and we have tikanga and we have kōrero that informs us of our relationship to that and how we interact with that. And that is based on working together in a deep democracy where those resources are understood as well as the limitations. And so therefore we conduct ourselves accordingly. And as we've seen for thousands of years, and even here in Aotearoa, our people have been able to live in balance and with our environment as to make sure that that exploitation and getting ourselves to this point of serious trouble doesn't occur. So how do we get from this extractive economy over to the rauwara that you see on the right? And that's really through us really challenging what are our values and how do we filter through that in order to reach a way of us existing and being able to express our way of living within Te Taiao. So I guess I'm just going to bring it back more to a local example. So this is from this morning. So that are familiar with Waiheke, which is where I am at the moment and where I've spent all of my life. And my nana, my grandmother and my mum as well have been here on the motu, so have a deep connection to Waiheke. And at the moment we are seeing the ecosystem of Putiki Bay being further compromised, the bay that has already been put at risk, and within a moana that we know is in decline and in ecological collapse. And so as a community, we have seen a challenge against that in terms of how do we look at our bay, how do we look at this environment, how do we look at this ecosystem and then determine that it is healthy enough and strong enough to be able to withstand and to survive the kind of destruction that we're going to see in the bay through the development of a 183 berth marine. Kia ora. I'm not sure what happened there. I think it just maybe I'm on Waiheke with a really bad connection, so it might have dropped out. But I just wanted to really focus on a community effort that's happening here on Waiheke amongst many other kaupapa that are happening on the motu. And it's been a really exciting opportunity to see just how much people care about our taonga species, just how much people care about our ecosystems and our moana, and understanding the life that exists within the bay. So this is just some examples of the life that is dependent on the life-sustaining and the life support system of Putiki Bay. So we have the terehu, which is the bottlenose dolphin down there in the left-hand corner. We know that there's around 450 of them that are between the Bay of Islands and Tauranga. So we are very fortunate that they frequent our bay at Putiki. On the right, the Matuku moana, 300 to 500 of them left in the country. And above that, a phenomenal shot that actually captures 3 of our shags in one photo. We have the Karuhiruhi, the Kawotui, and the Kawopaka. And so we know that this bay is full of life. But what is happening, and an example of the way that extractive economy is held up, is that the only manu that really came to the forefront in terms of the resource consent that was granted for the development at Putiki Bay was around the korora, which is our little blue penguin. But we know as locals, and we know through the kōrero of our elders within our community, that there are multitudes of life within this bay and that are dependent on this bay. And so this has become a really exciting opportunity to get our community involved with and understanding the bay, particularly through Mātauranga Māori and the Mātauranga study that was done by Mauri o Te Moana and alongside Whaia Ramari Stewart, who is a tohunga Mātauranga. And I must also say a phenomenal wahine toa, who has also recently had the newest species of whale named after her, Ramari's beaked whale. So we know that the biodiversity within Putiki Bay, within Tikapa Moana, the Hauraki Gulf, is already under threat. And so when we see further development, or what's deemed as development, and further threats enter into our ecosystems, we become very concerned, because it's not about just us. It's about the importance of us recognizing that all of our taonga species are our tuakana, all of our taonga species, we also whakapapa to, and we have a responsibility to, and they are struggling because our ocean is in serious trouble. So the message here is that the governance structure that we have seen has failed our environment. It has failed our wildlife, and it has failed our ecosystems, which means that there has been a degradation of the Māori, of our moana. And if we are to look at the concept of Māori, the Māori is the essential element that sustains all life forms. It is the vital link between all ecosystems and the diversity of life within each ecosystem. Another really exciting and incredible event that happened this year in January was that the local iwi here on Waiheke, Ngāti Pawa, placed a tikanga rahui around Waiheke for the protection of taonga species. We know that we go down to the moana and we don't see tipa, we don't see kaura, kutai, we don't see pawa anymore. And so there was a rahui placed around the island. We know that 10 months down the track, the government has still not backed that up through legislation by approving the temporary closure under the Fisheries Act Section 186A. However, when you have the power and the enthusiasm of community who know what's happening within their backyard, that know what's happening within their moana, there is a huge momentum and support for the tikanga rahui that has been placed around Waiheke. So even though that hasn't been backed up by government and through MPI as of yet, and we definitely encourage the Minister of Oceans and Fisheries, David Parker, to do this, to approve the temporary closure, we know that within our own community, we are seeing a lot of support for the rahui, And I like the term that my dad uses, which is when you have this kind of community support and for the kaupapa, that, you know, people within your community almost activate the little policeman inside themselves, which is to inform others and to hold others to account if they are continuing to extract these things out of our moana that are already, you know, either functionally extinct or reaching that point. So just in terms of Mauri o Te Moana as a kaupapa, you know, there are a few different things that we are focused on. Intelligence gathering is really about informing ourselves and doing research and making sure that we understand what's going on. Campaigns to support different hapu and iwi with protection of their moana, which can be through rahui, like what we've seen with Ngāti Hei out on the Coromandel with the rahui, up in Whangaroa with the rahui up there on Tipa and also on Waiheke. The importance of mātauranga Māori. And mātauranga Māori is not something that is to be you know, kind of pulled in and drawn into the, and kind of added onto a Western science way or approach of doing things. They need to be recognized as their own separate things with their own mana, and the importance of that. And I think that when we look back into our history, you know, that we can see out there on our, within our moana, through the kōrero that's passed down to us from our kuia and kaumātua, we know that things have drastically changed over a very short amount of time. So mātauranga is key, and recognizing those people within the community, within the hapu, within the iwi that can inform that. And then the ability to wānanga together, just like we're coming together today to talk about this really important kaupapa. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you for allowing the opportunity for us to kind of share our kaupapa here today. And massive change is needed, and it's needed needed right away. And I just want to end on the point that the rahui that we've seen placed around Waiheke and the rahui out at Ngāti Hei is an excellent example of rangatiratanga that has been asserted by the hapu and by the iwi. And the government should be working at the directive of iwi, of hapu and iwi, and following up on the rahui that have been placed by approving those Section 186A applications as promptly as possible. So that's it from me today. And I'm now going to hand over to Kepa Morgan, who also has a connection here to Waiheke, and has also been a huge inspiration to me with the incredible mahi that he has done, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you, Kepa. Kia ora koutou.
Ai, kia ora Bianca. Ka whai. Neira taku mihi, mai te whai ao ki te ao marama tihei Māori ora. Ka tika, ka miki a koutou katoa, e putu mai o koutou whakaro kei roto tēnei mininga. Tēnā koe hoki Gannon, tō tātou kaiari mo te huine. Wāku mihi ki a koutou hoki e ngā taringa areare o wēnei kōrero. Māori ora ki a koutou katoa. He uri tēnei no te hikapui o te arawa, ko Ngāti Piki ao te iwi, ko Ngāti Tirangunora e mihi atu nei. Tēnā koutou katoa. I am Kepa Morgan and the creator of the Māori Model Decision-Making Framework. Māori, as Bianca has said, is the life-supporting capacity. It binds the physical to everything else that supports life, and it enables everything in the universe. My message is this: Mōiotanga iwi, or Indigenous knowledge, has a unique contribution to make regarding climate change response. Indigenous knowledge does not focus on the individual, but rather is focused on all of our collective roles within our ecosystems of origin. Our ecosystems of origin are identified by the mountains, the rivers, the lakes, and the forests that have carried the names of our ancestors for millennia. Indigenous knowledge is place-specific and has already aligned values-based practices and beliefs that ensure the continued flourishing of the ecosystem to produce conditions of abundance. But the world we now live in is being destroyed by consumerism and corporate greed, and a number of the previous speakers have referred to this. Consumerism has created artificial realities that can only be sustained by processes that cause resource depletion, excessive waste, and pollution. One of the symptoms of this is climate change. Another is the disappearance of nature. But the disappearance of nature does not matter to peoples who exist in artificial realities. Even the global pandemic did not really disrupt this. In an Indigenous reality, nature does not exist separately from the peoples of that place. And several of the previous speakers have said this also. It does not exist because the Indigenous people and nature are an inseparable reality. Nature matters when the name of the river and your own are the same, as in the case of the Waikato people and the Waikato River. The separation of nature from humanity is an artificial concept of Descartesian science. The separation of people from nature facilitates practices such as the rape of the global commons and ownership of resources at a scale that diminishes the responsibility for and respect towards those resources that is essential for their continued flourishing and abundance. Compelling Indigenous ways of relating to nature are needed. Holistic understandings of nature through an Indigenous lens are needed. The Māori model decision-making framework was created for this purpose, and I'm going to share one of the tools in that with you now. Okay. So you're looking at Te roto iti whaiti ai hinga I ariki ai a kahu matamomoi. The lake outside my door, the lake that carries the name of two of my ancestors, Ihinga and his uncle, Kahu Matamomo. Okay, I'm wondering what's happening. Let's see. Bianca mentioned Māori, and what is different about Māori is the way our tupuna understood it and measured it. Bianca mentioned that Māori was our way of understanding sustainability and continued flourishing. The difference between Indigenous knowledge and science is this. Our tupuna without a written record did not focus on normality. They did not focus on recording data that represented what was normal. And so on this modiometer, you can see that no change ranges between a -0 and a +0. This is normal variation, and our tupuna had the good sense not to really be paying too much attention to that because they knew that that was normal. What they did was they focused on the outliers, the things that science tends to disregard. The outliers, when it's outside normality, are either going to be better than normal or worse than normal. And those are correspondingly positive and negative impacts on the modi of that thing or that collection of things. Now, in terms of that also, our tupuna realised you only really needed to know if it had hit its absolute carrying capacity or its absolute flourishing or its absolute exhaustion, depletion, extinction. And what it does is when you look at the ecosystem and everything around you in this way, and your responsibility is kaitiakitanga, or enhancing the modi for the future, you're going to act to ensure that the modi is always going to be on the positive side of the modiometer. Conversely, all of the practices we've been talking about that represent our world today, consumerism, pollution, exhaustion of resources, and everything else sits on the negative side of this modiometer. And in fact, we talk about approaching tipping points. The -2 is the tipping point. Our tupuna would look at us and think we were crazy. Why are we even on this side of the modiometer? If you want to look at it in technical terms, tipping points to your left, sustainability to your right. And the easy way of understanding what change is happening is if change is normal, then that's normal variation and scores 0. But if it's not, it has to be positive or negative. And unless it meets the absolute threshold of +2 or -2, it's a partial change, being +1 or -1. So this is what you can do with that simple understanding. You can actually represent holistic understandings of Indigenous people, as this one for the Waikato River is representing. You have 4 dimensions of Māori, representing what's understood as the 4 well-beings in the Resource Management Act. Those can be combined simply because you have a simple scale. You can combine and aggregate scores for different indicators without losing the meaning of that collection of indicators. And you can combine all of the dimensions likewise. You can show them back on the modiometer, which are immediately recognizable as what's happening. And the modiometer in the center is showing a normal modi, and it's trending positive. Just to finish my discussion, the modiometer is intuitive, but is also extremely practical, as it can be used to measure both quantitative and qualitative measures, and the aggregation of scores is intuitive. The example I've shown was for the Waikato River. And I'm going to come home to Haumai Tawhiti. Haumai Tawhiti, our ancestor in Tawhiti Areare in Hawaii, he provided the instruction to the Te Arawa people in his kupu ohaki, one line of which is tutua mai te whiwhia mai te rawe, bind all in the world of light to everything else. It is Māori that binds the physical to all else that facilitates life. Nō reira, ko te Māori matangaro e kore e kite, ina rā ka mātanga te ine i tēnei mea te Māori, ka matua te iwi. Ko te Māori kia oho, ko te Māori kia tū, ko te Māori kia ora, kia matara. Nei rau aku mihi, tēnā koutou katoa.
The University of Waikato is proud to introduce the world's first Bachelor of Climate Change for the people who know there is no Planet B. Gain the skills needed for the jobs of tomorrow. Contribute to a fundamental shift in the way we do business and go about our lives. Explore how Mātauranga Māori can bring perspective to the most pressing issue of our time. Apply now and carve a career where passion and purpose collide.
Enjoyed listening to you all and your kōrero.
Kia ora. Yeah, no, it was just awesome to have the opportunity to share on the webinar. I loved your kōrero, Kepa, and Kina's to, kōrero some more about a few things that you shared, and just the Māori meter is incredible, and we did when we did a mātauranga study on Pūtiki, it was really about the Māori of the Bay, and so looking at the entirety of the Bay and what the Bay had already had to withstand, and how we determined, the korora has been put to the forefront of this specific kaupapa. And in terms of what we're focusing on with Māori o Te Moana, this is really small scale, but it's also really powerful because it's about community. But it's about, for us, it was about understanding the importance of all of our taonga species. We don't differentiate that one is at risk declining, one is, is endangered, nationally endangered. There are tuakana, and they're equally as important to our ecosystems and to the Māori of the Bay. And so, just awesome kōrero shared today, everybody, and hopefully we can create some connections from this opportunity moving forward. Kia ora koutou.
Yeah, kia ora Bianca. We've got something happening up in Tutakaka Harbour too, and I think we know that the kelp, for example, can sequester more carbon than sequester as much carbon as the rainforest, and we don't see the devastation that goes beneath the waves usually. So the other thing we're facing up there is a whole lot of sedimentation, and of course we have the kinnibarrens that are all along our shores. But we don't want to. But in dealing with it, and I think Glenn Edney, you may have come across Glenn Edney down in Waiheke. I'm working with Glenn. Yeah. And thank you everybody for, it was good to listen to the diverse contributions. Very quickly, Hannah, I did a little bit of work too on that sense of agency that young people need. And I think hope is really important, eh? And they need both a sense of agency, they can do something about it, as Claire was talking about, but also pathways of action. And I think the pathways of action are to be found in the natural world.
That's right, and also making sure that everyone has equal access to nature, and to ensure that young people are empowered to actually engage with the world around them. And everyone has access to what should naturally be integrated into our everyday lives, but as we know, is not. So.
Ai, kia ora tātou. Well, that brings us to the end of this session, and I'm going to draw on a couple of whakatauki just to close out. The first is the one that Gannon used to begin his kōrero. E hara I te toa, he toa takitahi, ko te toa, he toa takitini. And that reflects that my strength is not that of myself alone, but that of those that I stand with. And Gannon is right in that. I think each of the presenters have given a really good contribution to this kaupapa today in this meaninga. The second part, after thanking our presenters, is to recognise the source of a lot of the knowledge that's been shared today. Nō reira, ka hika ia te ahi o maumahara nāianei. No te mea ko tātou tūpuna I ngā wā o mua, ngā hunga tiaki mo wēnei momo mōhiotanga. Nei rā aku mihi kia rātou whawheturangi hia. O ti rā, tātou ngā kanohi ora. Mauri ora, kia ora tātou. One final kōrero, and I think I can remember this, but there's a tauparapara that goes something like this. Ka rongo au I te rākau, ko rongo au I taku tuakana. Ka rongo au I te hau, ko rongo au I taku hauora. Ka rongo au I te wai, ko rongo au I taku waiora. A ko au tonu nei, he uri a rangi nui rawa ko papa tuanuku. Ko taku ao whakahirehira, kairunga I rātu, rawa. A he kākono tēnei, I ruia mai I rangi ātia, tihei mauri ora. And what that says is, when I stand in the presence of a tree, do I stand in the presence of my older brother? When I feel the wind, do I know that it's wind that sustains me? When I sense the fresh waters, do I know that I am of water? Rangi and Papa are my parents, and I dwell between them. I'm the seed sown in rangi ātia, tihei mauri ora. It is the breath of life. So kia ora tātou, thank you for watching.